So it's just after 8 o'clock, and I want to respect your time this morning, and thank you again to three amazing women who have agreed to join us bright and early on a Friday morning. And just to give you a little bit of background, Women Built to Scale is we call it a media advocacy initiative, meaning we're using media in the form of webinars, online media, magazines, conversations to have important dialogues with Canadian women about solutions to issues and advancement challenges that we may be facing. And we've had some great conversations since January. We try to do them once or twice a month. In the last couple of months, we've really been focused on an initiative called Board Power. And it's taking that conversation of women on boards just a little bit further. And really the idea behind it is to speak with Canadian women to try to gain and garner relevant information, insights, lessons learned, best practices, strategies, tips, tools, ideas, you name it, as to not only what do we need to know about getting on a board, what do we need to know about being on a board, what do we need to know about preparing and putting ourselves forward, and all of those things. So what I'd like to do to kick things off this morning is to announce each of our guests. And I just have your short bio prepared. I will be reading, so I apologize. And then I'm just going to ask each of you one at a time to kind of reflect on your board experience thus far. You know, why this conversation is relevant, why you have accepted the invitation to sit in on this conversation today. I know you all have very full schedules. I know that because with some of you I've been, this is not the first request to be here. So I'm going to start by introducing Marcela Mandeville, who is the CEO of the Alberta Women Entrepreneurs, so an extremely relevant organization. And Marcela has explored the world of business through a globally focused business undergraduate degree. She has a designation as a certified international trade professional and more than 15 years of global experience developing and implementing business strategies. She serves on the YES and the EEDC Board of Directors, which we'll ask her to elaborate on, and is a member of the AIECEC Edmonton Advisory Board and a former director on the Alberta Innovates Board and the former board chair of Literacy Without Borders. Marcela, thank you very, very much for being here. As you know, I extremely value the relationship that we are building slowly but surely, and I really do thank you for being here this morning. Just wondering if you could elaborate on some of what we heard and why this conversation is important to you.
Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be here today and an honor to be asked. So thank you. I'm really looking forward to this conversation, and I think that's one of the key reasons why I wanted to participate early on a gloomy, potentially snowy Friday in Alberta, to really have a conversation and continue the conversation about not only getting onto boards, but effective participation on boards. And also when it's time to perhaps move on or find other new opportunities and how to do that. So that's been something that I've been working on, putting a strategy together for myself over the past few years to not only combine the business board experience that I'd like to have, but also the community boards that perhaps are less directly related to my day-to-day work and balancing all of that out. So the two boards, it was a lot of letters. A lot of acronyms there. So just to quickly explain, YES is Youth Empowerment Services Society, and that works to walk along and support youth who are having difficulties along their journey. So I joined that board last year. really, really passionate about that cause and what they do in the community. EEDC is Edmonton Economic Development Corporation, so very closely aligned with my work in entrepreneurship and economic development. And then ISEC is an international student association that I was a part of in university, and I continue to participate as an alumni and also to support them in their efforts to continue their work. Wonderful university students, so I sit on their advisory board.
Oh, awesome. No, I love what you brought up about balancing between capacity building in your community and also making sure that you're part of boards that are very relevant to what you're doing right now. Yeah, great point. Thank you. I'm going to introduce now Fiona Macdonald, who is in a bit of a warmer part of the world as we speak this morning. Fiona is a director on the board of GMP Capital. It is a publicly traded investment dealer and wealth management company. She's also the director on the BC Ferry Authority. And for those of us in Western Canada, it's a very, very important board. That is the shareholder of BC Ferry Services, which operates one of the largest ferry fleets in the world with annual revenues above $900 million. She is a director on the Royal Canadian Mint, and she is also the chair of the BC chapter of the Institute of Corporate Directors. Fiona came highly referred by a mentor and friend, and I'm extremely grateful to have you on the call today. Fiona, I'm wondering if you could recap a bit of your current board experience and why you feel this conversation is relevant and where you'd maybe like to see it go today to ensure that it is indeed extremely relevant.
Oh, great. Well, thank you. Good morning. I am happy to be here, and I'm two reasons why I'm here today. One is when Tracy McVicker asks you to do something, you say yes, because I respect her so much. The other thing is I'm always willing to help people on their career journeys. It's whether it's young professionals, people at the point of trying to switch to board work. It is a conversation where there are just a lot of people helping other people, and so I'm delighted to share what knowledge I have gained and the perspective that I can bring. So happy to do that. And the conversation today, excuse me, one of the things I think is very hard for women is, or men too for that matter, but how do you sell yourself? How do you not sell yourself too much? How do you sell yourself enough? How do you, I hear a lot about putting yourself forward and selling yourself, and you start to cringe. So it's, if you do that wrong, it's worse than not having a conversation at all. So I think I'd like to talk about that, as well as about, as you mentioned earlier, really understanding the responsibilities of being on boards and some of the risks, and making sure that it's not just kind of a shiny new toy that everybody's thinking about, that people do understand what that role is and what it entails.
Thank you. I agree. I think even in our initial conversation, Fiona, you taught me some valuable things already, and I look forward to getting into that part of the roles and the responsibilities in the conversation. And Jay-Ann Gilfoy is our final panelist and guest this morning. She is the CEO of Van City Community Investment Bank. Jay-Ann is recently the CEO of a newly created bank, which is focused on helping bring finance to social purpose organizations. I'm very excited about Jay-Ann's new appointment and that she's here today. Jay-Ann draws on a wealth of transformation and change management experience from previous roles in Crown, private, and municipal organizations, including the BC Lottery Corp, Coast Capital Savings, where she served as the Chief Transformation Officer. She has served on non-profit boards, and she is also the past chair of the BC HR Association, and she's currently completing her ICD designation. Good morning, Jay-Ann.
Good morning.
And thank you for being here. I'm just wondering if you wanted to elaborate on that bio, and again, if you could highlight what why you think today's conversation is relevant, or how we can work together to make it most relevant this morning.
Yeah, I guess so. Having had a little bit of board experience, not a lot, and definitely at that stage of my career, Fiona just described, sort of, I've done quite a number of, senior executive roles now as CEO, and thinking about how do I take that into the boardroom. So that's the how do you take the experience that you've had into the boardroom? That would be the one area that I would like to have a little bit of conversation about. And I think that whole point around selling, how do you actually sell yourself? What kinds of boards? I think what kinds of boards do you want to be on? Because I think every board won't fit your values, or it won't fit your capabilities, or it won't fit what type of work you like to do. So I think sometimes we get caught up in the idea, like other things, that I really just want to get on a board. But I think it's a really, really important role to be a director on a board, particularly as Fiona on a publicly traded board. There's lots of risks, there are lots of challenges. And so you have to really, I think about what kinds of organizations you can get behind and be passionate about in order to serve that in that sort of very important role. So looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you. Yeah, no, some great points. So here highlighted so far, the appropriate amount of selling yourself, and also how do you take that experience and take it onto the board. I'm just going to, for those of you that don't know me, and even for our guests, so why is this relevant to Charlene, to a women's organization? So I'm going to try to encapsulate that. I'm just finishing a 7-year term on municipal council. So I feel that I have a decent amount of experience in governance, in community engagement, community economic development. I'm a past graduate of a community economic development course, a certificate program, and I'm very passionate about developing strong rural communities and how that fits into urban centers, because I really do feel that a lot of women are craving lifestyle and leadership. But most importantly, the conversation of board power really feels relevant to PowHERhouse, because as I speak with women who are growing their business, who are growing in their professional careers, I try to highlight a conversation, the difference between leadership and influence, and how those two play together. And to me, having a board position is a huge way in how you are growing your position of influence, which is so important to be aware of as a leader. Sometimes entrepreneurs are so focused on growing their business and their numbers, they also need to understand the importance of who am I as a leader, and how am I growing my position of influence as that leader. So I try to highlight that conversation, which to maybe to some women is really old hat, but to a lot of women, it's opening up those blinders a little bit. So with that, we're going to jump into our very first question. And I think we're going to start right with what both Fiona and Jay-Ann spoke of. And again, I encourage you to just, respond with your initial answer. But then if someone says something that you'd like to play off of, this really is meant to be a conversation, not an interview. So our question to kind of kick us off this morning is just simply this. It's about encouraging women to educate themselves, know the type of experience they're looking for when they go searching for a board, and really know the roles, the risks, and the responsibilities that do come to you as a board member. And I'm going to start this conversation off by asking Fiona to comment, because as I mentioned, she certainly has taught me some things in this area already. So I think it's a great way to kick it off. Fiona, where are your thoughts starting on the roles, risks, and responsibilities that women really need to educate themselves around, as we're this kind of flavor of the month, the bright, shiny object about getting women on boards? What are we missing here?
Well, I'm not sure it's missing, but it's just an important part of the consideration. many people, women and men as well, think that getting on boards was going to be a wonderful career transition strategy. And they're right, it is. It means you can not work like a lunatic all the time. You can just have periods of intense busyness and periods of white space where you can do other things. And so in that case, that is true. It also, again, there are for-profit boards for which you get paid, but again, I think people aren't always aware of what the responsibilities and the requirements that come with that. So if you're on a publicly traded board, there are pretty universal rules. There'll be exceptions, of course, but there are pretty universal rules where you have share ownership requirements. So you need to hold 3 to 5 times your compensation from the firm in stock in that firm. What that means is that you will not get any cash flow out of that exercise being on that board for 3 to 5 years. And maybe longer, because if the share price goes down, you're required to buy more. So and there is also no good time for a director to sell. So, when you think about how much of the Canadian economy is in natural resources, mining, oil and gas, petrochemicals, anything, those are very cyclical businesses, and they have a big risk profile. So depending on, if you think, well, I'm just going to stop doing my job and I'm going to make $100,000 a year, on 3 different boards, I'm still making a 300, I'm good. The answer is you're not. You need to be able to be in a position, you need to be able to be in a position to resign on a point of principle. You need to be independent enough that when an opportunity comes for the organization to get bought out in an M&A deal, that you're not thinking, oh, darn, I want to be on a board. I won't be, you can't, you have to have the ability to put aside any self-interest. And you really do need to think about how risky that organization is in terms of its stock performance. I've talked to one gold mining company a number of years ago, and we didn't proceed. And I look at the market cap now compared to what it was then. It was probably, $9 billion then. It's about $1 billion now. And it's still going south. So if I had bought stock in that organization, it would all be gone. So again, being really familiar with what that involves. I'm on a BC Crown Corporation board and also on a federal Crown board. Those come with less risk, reputational risk for sure, less risk, but also less pay. It's like hilariously nominal. You do it because it's interesting and because you can, because it's part of the journey. They're intensely rewarding, but in terms of being able to live off the pay, no. So again, I think it's just useful for individuals to have an understanding of, yes, this is a career step, but it's not necessarily a cash flow career step. So I'll stop there. I have more to say, but I'll stop there.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, Jay-Ann or Marcela, if you had a comment or a question that you wanted to play into that. I personally didn't realize, I knew there was a share requirement. I didn't realize the extent of them, quite honestly. So I find that all very fascinating and something that I think women definitely need to be aware of.
Yeah, I was gonna just, I think also with, if you start to read about things that are happening in a lot of organizations and other issues, right? CEO issues, you start to read about them, work, all that stuff that's going on. And if you are a member of a board of a publicly traded, fairly high threshold for fiduciary responsibility and duty of care. And so, not only do you have this financial, economical thing that Fiona just mentioned, but you also have, I think, there's some challenges with your own personal reputation, with your own, the legal part of whether or not you're covered with enough insurance. So there's definitely some complexities to it. So I would agree that I think that.
Yeah, we just lost you for a second there, Jay-Ann.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, you might just need to repeat your last thought.
Yeah, I just said, I think you have to really think about where you want to put your energy, because it all sounds super sexy to be on a board, but maybe it doesn't transition to what you actually thought it was going to be.
Yeah, good point.
No, I agree with that. And just to echo what Jay-Ann said, I agree completely. The reputational risk is enormous. If you think about recently the Hydro One directors, very seasoned people,
right.
Reputations tarnished. If you think about CP Rail's directors, if you think about Sears Canada's directors, and you think about, again, part of this is you do only have influence, you're not in charge. And so sometimes there were decisions made a long time ago that you have to live with. Sometimes there are decisions made that you should be thoughtful about. If you think about a Nortel, when you go bankrupt and you can't pay severance and the directors get sued, and yes, you have liability insurance, but it's a nightmare of a time commitment and legal fees and so on. And, you can be a Sears Canada director, and they funded the executive pension requirements, but by the time the organization came to its end, there wasn't enough to pay the pensions of the workers. And there's just a lot of stuff. These are as Jay-Ann said, these are serious roles with huge consequences to decisions that are made. They're shared decisions. They're not yours and yours alone. And the tail risk on them is long and meaningful. So with that, I'll turn it back to Marcela. Sorry, I had to jump in.
No, it's great. Marcela, any thoughts or questions that you want to add in this vein? I've got a couple myself, but yeah.
Yeah, no, this is really interesting. And it's, I myself don't have the paid corporate board experience yet. And I have been exploring what that would look like. So this is a really interesting conversation for me. A big reason why I haven't, I'm still building up my experience to be able to get there. But I feel too that the risk awareness is a really important piece of it. And not only, we talk about the fiduciary responsibility and also, there's reputational risk. There is also, really, I think, understanding the values of the company, understanding the management philosophy and the executive philosophy. How is the company run? What is the vision for the future? I think it requires a lot of homework to be able to, accept or apply for the positions that are really relevant. So, a lot of the questions that I have for my mentors in the board space is, to get a better sense of how to get that information. Really true information to help make those decisions. And even when I'm joining boards, so it's not paid corporate boards, but even if I'm joining boards like economic development or even community boards, I try to find out what are the right questions to ask, make sure that it's going to be the right fit for me now, and also where I want to be in the future. Because the worst thing is I really dislike quitting something. And so I really take that commitment very seriously, and I want to make sure that when I commit to something that I'm going to be able to stay and apply my skills and my talent to that particular board or organization.
Yeah, and if I can jump in on that, it's interesting. I mean, whenever I get approached about a potential board, there are a number of things I do. I read the proxy statement. You pull up the proxy statement. These are publicly traded companies. The financial statements, the MD&A, the management disclosure and analysis. You read all those, but it's interesting. I had one case where I was approached by a search firm, and this fellow's reputable. He's got a big reputation. Anyway, I had to sign a non-disclosure agreement, and then they sent over a package of material. So the package of material had absolutely nothing in it of any use, and nothing in it that was private. It was all public information and plenty of it. And you're thinking, good God, like why this? What I had done is I'd done a quick search, and what I found that wasn't in the non-disclosure, that wasn't anywhere near any of the information that he was sharing, was that there was a huge issue with management and some of the directors. They had taken out more in compensation, the executives and the directors, than the remaining market cap of the company. It's just like, you must be joking. And this guy stood up there and was just, so I called him to say, I don't think this was a good fit for me. Talking about, the values of an organization. he was calling me to tell me that he found much better people than I was to fill his board. They were very seasoned, and thank you very much. I don't need you. And I'm going, great. I get you don't need me. That's fine. But here's my, and he could have cared less. Mm-hmm. So part of my statement on this is there are sharks swimming around in the sea. And so where you get your information is do independent research, be an independent thinker. Don't trust, even like I had one where it was a friend that was said, could she put my name forward on a board? And I think it was a friend and a mentor. So I said, absolutely. It was a storied company. And when I did some quick research, I was like, oh my God, these guys are in terrible trouble. And I don't have the skill set in this particular case of how to deal with that industry or that case where the debt was going to take them down. So I arranged to go and meet, and I said, here's my concerns. And she goes, why do you think I'm getting off the board? And you go, you're a shark.
Yeah.
Like there just are a lot of sharks swimming in the sea, even people you view as mentors. So again, it is a journey for independent thinkers, and don't depend on anybody else.
Very valuable. Oh my goodness. I'm going to segue into our next question because I think it is really suitable. And what came up for me from this last part of the conversation is just how important knowing where you're at on that leadership ladder, on that journey. And we all are at different points of it, which I did a little bit on purpose because I think that's women in Canada. We're trying to bring women up, younger women forward. We're trying to harness the wisdom, the experience from women who are there and have been there. And we're trying to be very, very relevant to women in upper and senior levels of leadership who are looking to transition and have very key positions of influence at this time. So it's all of us together that are going to move this conversation forward. It needs to be relevant to all of us. So the next question kind of goes into that concept of the leadership ladder, which Kathy Warner, talked about, reminded us of in the last webinar. Just knowing where you're at in that ladder right now, what you're ready for, what type of board. And our next question is simply this. It's starting with that substance, knowing why you are a perfect fit for a particular board and what board that might be, knowing if you're a specialist or if you're a generalist, knowing what you're bringing to the table when you go to a board, and will it be helpful to them? Will it be valuable? Fiona just said she recognized with that one board that she didn't have that particular what it was going to take over there for them. So being that independent thinker, that being that, just having that self-awareness to really, really know where you're fitting. So again, I'm going to reverse the order slightly this time around, and I'm going to ask you for your immediate thoughts and reflections on that question, and then maybe we can open it up for a bit of discussion. But Jay-Ann, just with some of your HR experience and your team building and your change organizational experience, I thought it would be great to for you to kick this off, if you don't mind, and what words of guidance you might have for women about those leadership positions in evaluating what you might be a perfect fit for, figuring out what that is for someone.
Yeah, I guess for me personally, having led HR, sort of my first career was in HR. So I led HR for 3 different organizations, reporting to both the HR committee of the board and the CEO. So, one of the main responsibilities of a board of directors is to hire the CEO and to make sure the CEO is doing the things that they need to do for the organization. So I think, given my history, and I've been through, as you can imagine with HR, I've been through firing CEOs, hiring CEOs, building executive teams. So I have some capability for sure in helping organizations do that. So I think if there was a board for me that was in transition and needed to really think about how you build or rebuild or start from a place of needing a strong culture and the right kind of leadership and all that kind of stuff, I could definitely influence that. equally, I've done 2 major core transformations in terms of changing out core systems in an organization. And, you know, technology is one of those areas where organizations spend a lot of money, and there's not a lot of people who know how to do it, and there's not a lot of great understanding, and the risks at the board level are significant. It's typically a big piece of their capital spend. So technology is another area that I have capability in. And then I think where I need to grow my own experience would be on the financial side, running of the business. And so that's part of my core responsibility in my new role at the bank. But so I'm really clear what I'm good at, and I'm really clear on what I'm not good at. So I think, to your question, I think that's the work that we all have to do, is to be able to be clear on where we think we can add value, and then look for those opportunities that lean into that, versus maybe just because the risks, as we talked about, the risks are high, you know, the reputational risks are high. It does require a lot of work and a lot of reading, as Fiona said. It's not a, you know, go to a meeting every quarter for 4 hours is a ton of work. You'll never know everything that's going on in the organization just because you can't. So being really thoughtful, I guess, in terms of what you think you want to be able to do with that, on that role at a board level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just that self-reflection, that
self-reflection. Yeah.
Marcela, what do you think? You know, the entrepreneurs, like, you know, we're by nature, we're a bit of, you know, generalists, right? We have to also know what we can own, but we're a bit of generalists. That's what we get. That's what we get paid for. Sometimes we have to cover a lot of bases. But when you think about your own journey and you know, maybe the women that you work closely with, what type of thoughts come up for you? What type of questions or advice in terms of really discerning, you know, what board you're ready for, what you'd add to a board, and how to start to really think about where you'd best add value?
Right. So, you know, I think there tends to be I can do it all mentality in many cases. So myself and a lot of the women that I'm surrounded by. And the reality is, you know, you will burn yourself out. And I have personally experienced that. So, you know, I think it is really important to know, you know, for example, I really thrive in an environment that's transitioning, where there's a lot of change. It's very dynamic. And that's where I've spent a lot of my career. So my professional life, where I've done the best, is in environments where that's happening, and that there is like a lot of activity and building new strategy, new systems. And so I'm a builder, and I find that I'm drawn to, or requested, my presence is requested on boards that are going through the same kind of experience. But what can happen is that perhaps is a little bit too much. And so I know that I have a skill set in that area, but I also know that I can't be in all facets of my life surrounded by what appears to be chaos. So, or a lot of change. So I think one of the things I've been looking for is balance in my board commitments and also professional work that balances out some of that activity around change and transition and applying the skills and the talent that I have towards that and strategy, and also balancing that out with commitments of boards, for example, that are more stable, that have, you know, senior experience in having, perhaps they have experience already in going through what I am currently going through, and being able to see the other side of it in that experience. And I think part of it too is being open to learning, being open to look at things in a different way. And I think that's why I love to be a part of boards, because not only am I bringing the diversity of my perspective, it's also helping me to gain other perspectives and add that to how I view the world, how I approach business, how I approach the challenges that I'm facing on a daily basis. I find I can learn a lot from the other people sitting around the table in these boards or on these boards. And I also get to, I guess, meet people who come from very different experiences than mine, like professional experiences. so I can definitely learn a lot. So I look at not only opportunity to share what I know, but who's around the table. For me, that's a big draw for joining a board. When I look at the types of people and what I could possibly learn from them, that is a big incentive for me to want to participate.
Some great thoughts. Yeah, it's leading me to a question. I'm going to ask Fiona to respond. I do have a very particular question that I'm wondering if you guys know the answer to. But Fiona, I'd love your thoughts on this question about relevancy and making sure you're adding value and knowing where you're going to add value. And maybe you could also comment. I know Jay-Ann brought up earlier. How are you being aware of how you're transitioning your professional experience, your leadership experience as an executive, and then how do you actually take that into a boardroom, right?
Yes, it is interesting as you try to figure out, because as they both Marcela and Jay-Ann have talked about, it is a position of influence, not a position of direct authority. And so the question is, what in your background or your skill set do you bring that will help the organization? Because you're two things when you're on the board. You are overseeing the CEO. So as Jay-Ann said, you can end up sometimes having to change out the CEO. So there's skill sets, to usually change the strategy or change the CEO if the CEO likes the current strategy and it's not working. So there's that. But you're also, more importantly, I think, or more regularly, the peers of the CEO, like that you are the group that the CEO, that he or she needs to look to for advice on a lot of things. And so the question is, what skill sets do you bring so you're operating at that level where the CEO would even find you slightly useful, as opposed to, oh my God, I have to get ready for my quarterly board meetings, and the last thing I want to do is, all I want to do is get in, get my agenda approved, and get out. So the question is, where would you add value? And so again, I really like Jay-Ann's comments. Is it because you can do talent management, which needs much more attention at the board level? Is it because you can do that sort of project management, big IT project things, technology transformation? Again, most boards will say that they're desperate for that sort of help. So knowing where your areas are that you can help, I find that my belief is that the single greatest skill set that will get you on a board, or woman on a board, is finance. It's the ability to chair an audit committee, because no one wants to do that. It's a lot of work, and it's just a lot of work. So if you could skip it, you would. But it is the key to getting in for many people, particularly for women. It does two things. It fills a gap that they need, and it also tells that organization that you have financial acumen. I mean, serious financial. I'm not a financial acumen. I'm not a financial expert. Becoming a financial expert is a great thing to be, because it also means that when they're doing those strategies and trade-offs and so on, you can help the organization find its way through very complex and very uncertain factors, as opposed to taking a soft approach to things. So you need, those really crisp thinkers. So I think that's a good thing to know. I think when you're developing your career, either you're from the industry side or you're from the professional services side or the entrepreneurial side. And so if you're thinking about as somebody on the corporate side of things from an industry, you'll have deep industry expertise, which is great. Make sure you don't get siloed. Make sure you're building out your career, so that's giving you all those exposure to the different pieces. And if you can have business unit responsibility, P&L responsibility, that's also great, because it shows that you're operating at that sort of more senior business, more rounded business level. I think that's great. But let's say you're trying to transition and you're not finished your career. You still need to keep earning money. You can't go from being an oil and gas executive at company A to being a director on an oil and gas company B at the same time, probably. So is there an adjacency? Could you do a mining company? Similar issues and so on. So it's thinking through, I think, the transition to the strategy. If you're a professional services person, which is my background, you have great breadth, you have a great network. It's giving you lots of opportunities, But the question is then where to focus. Like, what did you actually know? Did you deal with like very large publicly traded companies and you get bureaucracies, you get, how you affect change in that kind of organization? Were they more medium-sized or smaller or privately held companies? So it's thinking through what happens. I know as a professional services person, I spent most of my career in board meetings or in committees of boards. They saw me as a subject matter expert. The challenge was to try to get them to see me as a potential board member. Different, very different. They're like, well, I could just hire someone like you if I need someone. I don't need to put you in that permanent role. So it's that I think the education part of it, I can put in a little plug for the Institute of Corporate Directors. I chair the BC chapter because I really believe in what they're doing. They have a director education program that I think Jay-Ann said you're finishing now. There are smaller courses as well that are more sort of bite-sized courses in cities across the country. There are regular, say monthly seminars. There are webinars. There are also all the professional services firms put out great intellectual capital and have great webinars. I mean, there's lots of ways to keep learning, but I think focusing on that growth and continued growth to understand what those roles and responsibilities are, I think is incredibly important.
No, so valuable. Just wondering if there's any responses or questions to anyone before I jump in, because I don't want to interrupt.
No, just to reiterate, I think Fiona's bang on the financial acumen. Like, I think if anybody, either men or women, want to be on boards, they really have to know that. They have to nail that piece. You cannot not know what's going on with the numbers in an organization, right, at the board level. So, and I think as women, we sometimes shy away from that, right? That's why you see successful women on boards coming from, the CPA route or running a business, because it's kind of the foundation of privately owned and publicly traded boards and not-for-profit. So how do you get that understanding of finance? I think is really important.
Any guidance there, Fiona? I think one of the most valuable bits of learning that I've had over the past 7 years is going through the budgeting process in my community. And if you don't think that is a challenge on how you're going to run a community on a very limited tax base, so at some level, like, I'm certainly not an accounting expert. I know my numbers as an entrepreneur. That's how you survive. But I've learned so much by going through a budgeting process that, of course, is run by professional staff, like the technical experts, but you have to have that strategic knowledge and it has to make sense. And then what I always felt I could add was you have to be able to communicate that in a way that makes sense to your shareholders, in our case, our residents, right? But Fiona, how do you, if you're not coming from an accounting background, how do you make sure that you're continuing that the continuum of growth that one of you talked about in and around your accounting knowledge and what you can add financially, if that's one of the ways for women to get on a board?
Well, I think it is by taking courses. Like, honestly, I don't think there's any other way around it. Because it's not just accounting, like you do, and you're right. If you understand the budgeting process and there's never enough money, that's a huge way to do it. But I started my career a long time ago as a banker, not an investment banker, but as a corporate commercial lender, and I still use those lessons that I learned, and the answer is people are optimistic, and all plans have hockey stick performance in them, so it's all going to get better later, and so it's also being able to probe the numbers and being able to you just have to have your mind in a place where you go, I need scenarios, I need scenario analyses, I need to know if this goes high, how high, if this goes low, how low, what if these things happen at the same time, what if we run out of cash, what if we have to do another equity raise, all those sorts of things. It's important to do that, and I don't know how you do it other than taking courses and building it, because it's also when you raise capital, how do you, I've seen large organizations where they were convinced by their investment bankers to do, to split the company into two to unleash the value. Well, it was terrible. You just give up the diversification benefits, and everything went to heck. Again, it doesn't mean that I was so smart sitting in the sidelines that I could see it. I was worried about that, right? It's that critical thinking where the board signed off on it. I don't know how worried they were or not, but in the end, it was not a very successful move. But again, it's you have to be able to think through financial, like cash flow things and capital investment decisions, and how long will that take, and does that make any sense, and what increasingly I think organizations are trying to deal with risk management. What happens when our world gets disrupted and our model doesn't work anymore, and our revenue starts to decline precipitously? I find I worry about the downside too much. I need to figure out how to contemplate the upside better, which I think is someone like Marcela probably has got all over that. And so I have to force myself to think, okay, this could go wrong and that could go wrong and something else could go wrong, but what could go right? Like, how do you put yourself in the way of having it go right without just, careless optimism, but with reasoned thinking behind it, so you have a fighting chance of it actually working, as opposed to, well, we thought it would work, but it didn't. And so it's I think it comes from breadth of experience. I think that's why being on some community or not-for-profit boards are useful, because you'll get into that area if that's not your own area. But I do think you have to take courses and figure out and maybe talk to mentors and say, what are the areas you need? Because you need certainly the basics. You need accounting basics. You need, but you need finance basics too. And so I watch BNN every morning when I work out. I keep adding to my knowledge, and other people might have already had that knowledge, but I didn't. And so, I've got other knowledge that I come with that other people wouldn't. So it's about continuing to read that. It's about understanding the broader environment. My biggest joy well, not my biggest joy, one of my exciting things when I retired from full-time work was I could actually read The Economist from cover to cover. It's just, I still can't read it cover to cover. I'm still failing at that, but I'm trying. So it's finding those things and growing your knowledge, but there is no easy way to grow financial acumen without spending a lot of time at it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. No, that's the brass taxes, right? No, that's great. I think that's very helpful. I'm going to jump into our last question, because I do want to make sure we also get through it. And it really is just kind of holding up a little bit of a red flag and going, there is a lot of excitement, there's a lot of support, there's a lot of momentum behind getting more women onto boards. But we also want to talk about that board power, and this conversation also includes executing your position successfully once you're there, both for yourself and for the board that you get on. And I think Marcela talked about that a little bit, like how are you maneuvering the boards that you want to be on, that maybe you need to let go of, what's the next best step for you. So it isn't, it's all great and fine to get onto a board, but how are you executing that position most successfully for your own experience and growth, for the value that you're bringing to the board, what you're able to do with that organization or that company? And I'm going to actually kick it off with Marcela this time, because I'm wondering if you have any comments or maybe additional questions that you'd like us to think of as we're discussing this part of it. I think for me, the word that comes up is sustainability in many ways around this question.
Yeah, definitely this is something I've been giving a lot of thought to. I completely agree with Fiona's comments on the finance side of things. So, our organization manages a loan fund of $6 million. And so we do have to have a lot of those interesting conversations with the, entrepreneurs that we lend to, and we are looking at financial information all of the time, and looking at the environment, the financial environment for business right now as well. So I think that's really important. And, that's been one of the challenges that I've been trying to rise to is showcasing that I do understand the financial side of business and the financial side of nonprofits. I run a very resource-strapped organization myself, so the comment about, so much to do and very limited resources is very true. Not only the organization I run, but also the organization on which I sit on their boards. So I think it's really important to stretch a little bit too. So, there might be a committee that is a great fit for the current talent that I bring, but there also could be perhaps a committee, join the audit committee and chair the audit committee at some point, and and learn and grow in that way. Or the governance committee, for example. So that's where I really like to learn and grow. So it's maximizing the talent you bring, but I think also stretching a little bit within that. And honestly, sometimes it's really difficult to find a fit or a voice on the board because it's the timing isn't right. Sometimes, unfortunately, being added to a board was for diversity's sake, for the look of it, not necessarily to really embrace the skill set. I've heard this from other folks that I've talked to, not just women, but other people that would be considered diverse on a board. And so I really dislike, and this has come up before, where people just assume I'm on a board because they could check a lot of boxes, being Indigenous, being a woman, being visible minority, not because of a skill set that could potentially be brought to the table. So I think it's really important to showcase I have these skills. I'm part of these really important decisions. I'm really a part of this really important due diligence, compliance, monitoring the success and supporting the success of an organization, not only on the softer side of things, but also on the financial and the more, the more specific areas of business that requires skill and talent and knowledge and education.
That's great. No, thank you. Yeah, I loved a lot of your comments about, maximizing the talent you currently bring, but not being afraid to stretch into the potential of, that you could bring in the right situations and with the right training and education and support. It's interesting to navigate all of that. Jay-Ann, what are some of your thoughts around this question about, what's next? You get on the board, but how are you actually, what should women, ourselves included, be thinking about in terms of bringing the best value while you're there executing that position as successfully as possible, and the longer term vision of it?
So I think the basics around making sure that you're prepared, right? That you're putting the time in ahead of time. I think understanding dynamics, understanding the people dynamics and the director dynamics. Like, how do you make sure you stay independent? You are there to listen. You have a curiosity around other perspectives. That you come with that sort of open mindset, I think, is really important to staying. And you look at the cases where something terrible has happened and the whole board gets into groupthink because they don't they care more about maintaining their relationships than they do looking at the issues. And I think you can do that at the operational level. You can be a team, but at the board level, your role is quite different. Your role is governance. Your role is oversight. Your role is independence. So I think the ongoing work, not only I agree with Fiona, involves keeping current with trends and through things like the ICD, but I think also putting some energy into understanding group dynamics and how you keep your own voice independent enough, I think would go a long way in terms of making sure that you're getting what you need out of it, right? But you're also doing your job, because I think it is quite different than being on a team, accomplishing something inside an organization. A board of directors, I don't think, is ever considered a team. I think they're considered, right? They're not. So it's a different way of thinking about group dynamics.
Mm. Interesting thought. Fiona, I'm gonna turn it over to you. Yeah, thanks.
Sure. Yeah, no, I wanted to add on to something that Jay-Ann said. I think it is a team. I think it is you'd like it to be a highly functioning team, including with, that all those people dynamics, but it is hard to find your voice and hard to know how to contribute effectively. And it sometimes it is those soft skills and so on. And I don't care if somebody recruits me to board because I'm a woman, great, like whatever. Like that I'll use everything I've got in the package that I am. But when you think about it, it's kind of a lonely thing because you want to be an independent thinker and all that stuff, but who do you actually go to when you think about your job now or normal jobs? You actually can talk to each other about stuff, and you have people that work with you or underneath you that you can help analyze stuff, or you can, you have peers that you can noodle things around with. I found, at least on my journey, the first board I joined was this publicly traded investment bank. Everybody on there is either an investment banker or a private equity person. They're like super successful. They're super smart. They're very seasoned. They've been around a long time. And I found, I'm not usually easily intimidated. I found it incredibly intimidating. Like, how do you contribute? Because they're also, I don't suffer fools very well. And so I don't expect anybody to give me a pass or to think I'm good. So I brought a particular skill set. When I'm talking about that, great. Everybody, that's fine. When I'm talking about more complex, bigger, broad strategy things in the industry, I'm not an industry. They all come from that industry. They have background that I don't have. So how do you contribute? How do you make sure you're not just ignored? And so part of that's an ongoing skill set with how you present and how you communicate. But it's also, it's for the first time in my life, I didn't actually have people I could talk to about this stuff. Like you can't talk to, your friends about it. You can maybe you have a mentor that you really think is okay, but this stuff is confidential and you're not allowed. I mean, some of it is super confidential when things are happening. And that's just when you need the advice and you can't actually ask anybody outside the organization. Is there someone you can ask inside the organization? Are you, in that case, I developed a very good relationship with the CFO because that's who I could talk to about a bunch of this stuff. And in some cases, the CEO would do that, but in some cases, that's not the right place, or the chair of the board, or somebody else. And so it is an interesting journey because even by asking for advice, are you exposing weakness? That will live for a long time, and so. We used to do this when I was in professional services. You take a more junior person with you to a client. You didn't want to take them too early because they're bound to say something that then the client will remember that they're just junior for long after they're not junior, right? Like it's it's again how you present yourself. So it is, to me, it's a continuing challenge, and you can't be smarter. You can't appear smarter than you are, right? That doesn't work. So I think my advice to people as they start on this journey is when you're networking, when you're asking seasoned directors, you're sort of trying to get yourself out there and show that you're interested, rather than talking about, can I have a job? Can I be on your board or one of your boards? Is ask them stuff about their journey. Like in what ways have they contributed? If they look back from where they are now and they thought about when they started, what do they wish they'd known then? Like that they now know. If they think about other directors that they can think of who contributed really well or who didn't contribute, at all well, why? And so it's trying to build a profile of what it takes and how people do it, because I have been involved in boards as an advisor to them for a long time, and you can always spot one or two people who just carry more weight than everybody else. And it's not because they have the loudest voice. It's because they're so experienced and so smart that they say stuff and you sound like, who is that person over there? And why is Charlene so smart? Like, what is it that she's doing? Like, but you can just watch when they talk that people take that it's just more gravitas when they speak. So again, it is a journey, but use those people, use the connection of those people to actually understand the roles better and how you could contribute, and then fit yourself into that. So.
I love it. Like I could have a whole conversation on what Fiona was just talking about. Like I could so dig into that. And I think that's exactly what I was meaning, Fiona. Like, why is it that when one or two people say something, you're just like, and for me, that's what I mean when I say that position of influence. It's all of those little pieces and how they are representing themselves, how they're presenting themselves, but yet the depth is there, you know, and that is a conversation that absolutely fascinates me. That's a bit of why I developed the Speak Canada program, to just start to open women's eyes about the importance. I don't care if you're a public speaker on a stage, or like, I'm just talking about that, just knowing how important it is to build that position of influence and then represent it well. And it really fascinates me. It honestly does. I really want to be aware of our time. The three of you are extremely, I hate to use the word busy, I'm going to say have full schedules, full, fun, and fulfilling. And so what will happen with this now, just to recap, Friday morning is a tricky time for women, but that's when I could capture you. So this is a recorded webinar. It will be shared with our database of women, almost 400 women that have signed up now, particularly to be involved with Women Built to Scale. I will also send it to you to send out to anyone that you think might benefit from it. For the women that were live today, thank you for being here. I will ask them to send me any burning questions or comments right away that I'll actually send out with the recording of this video to our database to include them on it. And our job as part of our media work is to continue this conversation online, whether that's by email with some comments and some notes when we share it on the website. So this is the beginning of the conversation with you today. We couldn't have done it without you. This is to take us to that next level. I definitely have a couple of very specific questions I'll be asking our presenters, more about a tool that I'm wondering if is available, perhaps you know, something that's already out there. And I just really grateful for you and your time, your energy, your expertise today. I just want to thank you very, very much for being here.
Thank you, Charlene.
Oh, delighted to.
Nice to meet you all.
Yes, I think that's it. I do hope the three of you have an opportunity to connect again. I really appreciate that.
Love that. Yeah.
And I will keep the conversation going online. Thank you so much for being here today.
Okay, have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.